Hello guys, I hope you're having a great day. So we are going to be creating an American Revolution booklet. So I kind of gave you a little preview of this yesterday, so that way you knew that you could come up to the school and get your own booklet if you would like to create one with us. And then also all of these pages are already printed out for you because it is a lot, so you could have also come up and got your own packet. Now we're only going to do certain pieces each day, so be sure to pay attention to that to know which part to pull off to cut out if you're going to be doing the cutting out. It is fine if you just keep it all together and write your answers on that page. That's good to do too. I'm actually going to get an example real quick. So this is the packet. If you choose to not cut it out, then you can, gotta turn the page. On the part that we're actually going to be looking at today here, you could just write your answers underneath, and that would work as well, instead of cutting and pasting each time if you can't come up and get the booklet. So you just need to make sure that you keep up with this, because I told you yesterday that this is going to turn into your American Revolution study guide, because at the end of our unit you will have a unit test, and a lot of the information in here is going to be on that test. So what we are doing today is, if you're creating the booklet, cutting out the cover page of your American Revolution booklet, gluing it down, and then also cutting out your table of contents and gluing it down. And then this page where it says the 13 colonies during the Revolutionary War. You can cut that out. Now, if you're making the booklet, you have to be careful that this part right here is actually the flaps, where you can see that we have answers underneath. So be careful not to glue that part if you're making the booklet. And again, you can just write the answers on this page. That's fine. So what I want us to look at today, that I hope that you have yours in front of you, because I'm just going to let you look at me instead of looking at the paper, that we're about to read through this quick little passage. Now, I continue to tell you that when you have any new piece of information that you're reading, to think, what does the author want me to take away? What is it they're wanting me to learn? So we already know, if this is an American Revolution study guide, that this is going to be true information. So I can throw out character, problem, solution, and I can think topic, organization, main idea. Now we have started to add to that once we know the topic and how it's organized, the main idea, which is like the main point the author's trying to make, I can then decide between that word pride that we went over the second 9 weeks. So when you have pride, I just thought about coming over and showing you this. So sorry, you are gonna travel with me for a second. That we have our poster that we've looked at, we made together, where it has the author's pride right there. And so when you have the author's purpose, it's why they're writing it. So they could either be persuading you to do something, they can be recounting a certain event, they can be instructing you on how to do something, they can be describing a group of people or a group of objects, or they can be explaining how or why something happens. So I'm hoping that that chart looked pretty familiar to you. Sorry, I hope I'm not making you dizzy as I'm walking around, but we are starting to think about that now as we read. So we are about to read this little paragraph together. So if you have it in front of you, I would love for you to read out loud with me as I read. So it says, the 13 colonies during the Revolutionary War. After European exploration, countries began sending settlers to live on newly discovered land. In the 1700s, British settlements were formed on the Atlantic coast of America. These were called the 13 colonies. A colony is an area of a country controlled by another country. These colonies existed between 1607 and 1776 and are known in history as the colonial times. The colonies were classified into 3 groups: the New England, which was New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut; Middle, which was New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware; and the Southern colonies, Maryland, Virginia, and North and South Carolina, and Georgia. Each colony had their own self-government, but technically had to answer to the king. Many of the colonies were named after rulers of England, and Massachusetts was named after a Native American tribe. The 13 colonies eventually banded together for one big cause. And I'm wondering how many of you, as I was reading, identified key details. So I did choose to use a highlighter so you could see that I actually had some things underlined, that while we were reading, we were trying to think, okay, what's the author want me to learn? Well, if the title is 13 colonies, he wants me to learn about the 13 colonies. So was the author persuading me to join the 13 colonies? Was the author recounting the event of creating the 13 colonies? Was the author instructing you on how to create the 13 colonies? Was the author describing the group of people of the 13 colonies? Or was the author explaining how or why the 13 colonies came about? So with that one, we said in class that it was kind of a mix of recounting but describing. So we looked back and we were thinking, okay, they didn't say on this day this happened and then this happened. It wasn't like a chronological event. So we decided, no, it's not recount. It is going to be describing a group or an event. So this is describing the 13 colonies and how they came to be. So you notice that here, I can't see, I have, there's 3 main types highlighted here in the middle, that we have the New England colonies, the Southern colonies, and the Middle colonies. So we highlighted those because that was describing the different types. Also, it told us what a colony was. Now, I'm not gonna say that answer because you're actually going to do that part on your own for what is a colony. And then it also, we know the text structure of this. If it was describing, then that's a text structure, but how do we know? So that's another question that you have to fill out on your own. But the one that we are gonna do together is this very last one, because I think we need to have a conversation about it. It says, why will the statement, each colony had their own self-government, be important? So first I have to understand, what does self-government mean? Self, I know that's me. When I do something by myself, I'm in charge of it with just me. I know government is how things are run. So that's people in charge of what's going on within that colony, it must be. So if it's a self-governing colony, that means they're the ones making the decisions. But I remember that it said technically they still have to answer to the king. And remember, we talked about this last week, that King George was demanding them to follow his rules. And remember that fun song that we got to listen to, You'll Be Back? Well, they said, no, we are self-governing. We want to do it ourselves. So how would that be important to understand about the American Revolution? Well, if they're a self-governing unit, then they are actually wanting to be independent from someone else ruling over them, especially a king who's in a whole nother continent. If we're on our own continent, then we should be self-governing. And that's what these guys were thinking. So under this flap, you are going to have to write that answer that I just gave you. So talking about what self-government means, why would that be important when thinking about the American Revolution? So that's all that we're doing with this flip book today. You guys are going to have to send in your answers for that. And then with this 13 colonies, we need to understand that as the king is saying, no, you still have to follow my rules, and we know at the very end it said they came together for one big cause, then we also need to do a quick recap of the French and Indian War. We learned about Native Americans and colonists before we read Harry Potter. That last social studies unit was Native Americans, and we know that they came over when Native Americans were still here and the colonists were trying to claim the land, and we know that that caused some friction, and that is where the French and Indian War comes in. We also know that last week when we were reading King George, Can't You Make Them Behave, that he said, now look, this war that we fought was on your land, so you need to pay us taxes so that way we can get our money back from fighting on your land. So I don't want you to get confused that the American Revolution was not the French and Indian War. The French and Indian War actually happened before that. So there is a brain pop video for you to watch to help you understand why that happened. And then also, they talk about a very important person in that French and Indian War, that there was a really important captain during that. His name is George Washington, that then later in his life, when it came time to revolt against the king, they chose him as their general of the Continental Army. And so today, in your new class novel, you'll understand why we're reading George Washington's Socks. So you'll have another video for today's novel. So today your task, remember, was that you now have put together your American Revolution booklet, and sometimes you might see me write AMR, that's American Revolution. You're going to watch the clip for the French and Indian War. You are going to begin your class novel, and then you are also going to have your independent reading time. And that's your day. So remember that today is also Tuesday. So I should see you on the Zoom. We have Zoom at 1 o'clock. So I'll see you there.